Something strange is happening behind the scenes and fans are starting to notice. After years of silence, tension, and public fallout, whispers are getting louder that Johnny Depp and Disney might be heading towards something no one expected: an apology. But is this really about fixing the past, or is there a bigger move tied to Pirates of the Caribbean 6? Insiders, past interviews, and subtle studio signals are painting a very different picture than what's being said publicly. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The moment people started noticing the shift wasn't through any official announcement. It was through silence breaking in very calculated ways. For years, Johnny Depp had been completely absent from anything related to Pirates of the Caribbean, and Disney made it very clear back then that they were moving forward without him. That decision wasn't hidden. It was public, and it came at a time when controversy around him was dominating headlines. But here is where things start getting interesting. Because what was once a firm no-return situation has slowly turned into something much less certain. Back in 2018, an executive connected to Disney film production reportedly told The Hollywood Reporter that the studio was looking to bring new energy into the franchise. This wasn't random wording. It was a clear signal that they were distancing themselves from Jack Sparrow without saying his name directly. And fans didn't take it lightly. You can actually track the reaction through archived comments, fan petitions, and even trending hashtags from that time. People weren't just upset. They were confused. Because for many, Jack Sparrow wasn't just a character. He was the franchise. Then came 2022, and everything changed direction. During the highly publicized legal case involving Depp, one statement stood out more than anything else. While testifying, Depp said that even if Disney offered him $300 million and a million alpacas, he wouldn't return. This wasn't just a joke line. It was delivered under oath, in a serious setting, and it instantly became one of the most quoted moments from the trial. Major outlets like BBC News and CNN covered that statement, giving it global reach. And at that moment, it felt final. But here's the detail most people missed. After the trial ended, the tone around Depp's career began to shift quietly. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to be noticed by people paying close attention. Appearances started increasing. Industry conversations became less tense. And most importantly, the door that seemed completely shut didn't look as locked anymore. In mid-2023, producer Jerry Bruckheimer gave an interview to Entertainment Tonight where he was asked directly about the future of Pirates. His answer was careful, but revealing. He said that they were working on multiple scripts. And when asked if Depp could return, he didn't shut it down. Instead, he said, "We'll see." Now that might sound like nothing. But in Hollywood language, that's not nothing. That's a shift from a hard no to a possible maybe. And that's where the rumors started gaining real traction. Not from random blogs, but from patterns, casting delays, script rewrites, and most importantly, the absence of any clear direction for Pirates of the Caribbean 6. Because if the studio truly had a strong plan without Jack Sparrow, it would have been visible by now. Instead, what we're seeing is hesitation. Then in early 2024, another layer was added. Reports began circulating that Disney was reconsidering its approach to legacy characters across multiple franchises. This wasn't just about Pirates. It was part of a broader strategy shift. Franchises that moved too far away from their original identity were struggling to connect with audiences. And Pirates, without Depp, is one of the clearest examples of that risk. Now here's where things get even more interesting. Insiders started hinting at what they described as relationship repair efforts. Not official negotiations, not contracts, but conversations. And while none of this has been confirmed publicly, the consistency of these reports across different entertainment journalists makes it hard to ignore. One example comes from a discussion panel covered by Variety, where industry analysts talked about how studios sometimes attempt to quietly rebuild relationships with actors after public disputes. They don't announce it. They don't confirm it. They test the waters first. And if the response is positive, then things move forward. This aligns perfectly with what fans are seeing now. No official apology from Disney, but a noticeable softening in tone. No confirmed return for Depp, but no denial either. It's a space filled with ambiguity. And in Hollywood, Ambiguity usually means something is happening behind closed doors. Another key moment that fueled speculation came when Depp himself addressed fan support during a public appearance in Europe. He didn't mention Disney directly, but he acknowledged that the character of Jack Sparrow still means a lot to him and to the audience. That's important. Because if he had completely disconnected from the role, he could have shut that down entirely. But he didn't. And then there's the business side of this story, which might be the biggest factor of all. Pirates of the Caribbean is not just a film series. It's a billion-dollar franchise. Merchandise, theme park integrations, streaming value. Everything is connected. And historically, the films featuring Depp as Jack Sparrow have been the strongest performers. That's not opinion. That's data. So now Disney is facing a very real question. Do they move forward without the one element that defined the franchise, or do they find a way to bring it back, even if it means revisiting past decisions? And this is where the idea of an apology comes in. Not necessarily a public statement with the word sorry, but something more strategic. In Hollywood, apologies often come in the form of opportunities, invitations, deals, ways to rebuild trust without addressing every detail publicly. But here's the complication. Depp's previous statement about refusing to return. That's still out there. It's documented. It was said under oath. And it sets a very clear boundary. So if there's any movement toward reconciliation, it wouldn't just require Disney to make a move. It would require Depp to reconsider his position. And that's why this situation is so unpredictable. Because both sides have something to protect. Disney has its brand image. Depp has his personal stance. And finding a middle ground between those two isn't simple. At the same time, fans are playing a bigger role than ever before. Online engagement, petitions, social media trends. These things actually influence studio decisions now. And when it comes to Pirates, the message from fans has been consistent. They want authenticity. They want continuity. And for many of them, that means Jack Sparrow. But wanting something and getting it are two different things. Because behind every major film decision, there are contracts, negotiations, and long-term planning strategies that the public never sees. And until those pieces align, everything remains in the rumor stage. Still, the fact that we're even having this conversation in 2026 says a lot. Because just a few years ago, this would have sounded impossible. The idea of Disney even being open to reconnecting with Depp would have been dismissed immediately. But now, it's being discussed seriously. And that shift didn't happen overnight. It happened through a series of small changes. Statements that left room for interpretation. Interviews that avoided clear answers. Industry conversations that hinted at possibilities instead of shutting them down. So when people ask if Disney is finally ready to apologize, the real answer might be more complex. It's not about one moment. It's about a process. A gradual movement from distance to potential collaboration. And Pirates of the Caribbean 6 sits right in the middle of that process. Because the longer the project stays undefined, the more pressure builds to make a decision that satisfies both the business side and the audience expectations. And right now, that decision hasn't been made publicly. But all the signs suggest that something is being considered. Something that wasn't on the table before. The real question isn't whether rumors are spreading. It's why they're spreading now. What changed behind the scenes that made this conversation possible again? Because in Hollywood, rumors don't just appear out of nowhere. They usually start when information begins to move, quietly, between people who know how the system works. And if you connect all these points together, the interviews, the statements, the timing, the silence, you start to see a pattern forming. Not confirmation, but definitely not coincidence either. And when you follow that pattern closely, something even more calculated starts to appear. Not just hesitation from Disney, but strategic timing. Because in this industry, timing is everything. Studios don't just revisit massive franchises randomly. They do it when market conditions, audience sentiment, and internal positioning all align. And right now, all three are quietly shifting in a direction that makes Pirates relevant again. But only if it's done right. One of the strongest indicators comes from how Disney has been handling its other legacy properties. Instead of fully replacing iconic characters, they've started blending nostalgia with new storylines. This isn't a guess. It's something discussed openly by executives during media briefings covered by Variety, where the focus was on reconnecting with core audience identity. That phrase matters because Pirates without Jack Sparrow risks losing exactly that identity. And internally, that creates pressure. Not public pressure, but boardroom pressure. Because when a franchise worth billions sits inactive for too long, it's not seen as safe. It's seen as wasted potential. And that's where the conversation shifts from should we move on to can we afford to move on? At the same time, Johnny Depp has been rebuilding his presence in a very controlled way. Not through loud blockbuster announcements, but through selective projects, public appearances, and creative work that keeps him visible without overexposing him. This matters because it changes how studios evaluate risk. A few years ago, associating with him came with uncertainty. Now, that uncertainty has reduced. Not completely gone, but significantly lower. There's also a financial angle that most casual viewers don't think about. Pirates films historically performed strongest internationally. Europe, Asia, and especially markets where Depp has maintained a strong fan base. Industry data discussed in panels referenced by The Hollywood Reporter highlights that global appeal is a key factor. And studios don't ignore global numbers. They depend on them. So when decision-makers sit down to evaluate Pirates 6, they're not just asking what story do we tell. They're asking what version of this story maximizes global engagement? And every time that question is asked, the same factor keeps coming back into the conversation. Familiarity. But familiarity alone isn't enough. Because bringing back a character like Jack Sparrow isn't just a creative decision. It's a reputational one. And this is where the idea of a quiet apology becomes more realistic than a public one. Not a press conference. Not a headline saying we were wrong. But something subtler. Like reopening communication channels, offering creative input, or restructuring a deal in a way that shows respect without directly addressing past conflict. This approach isn't new. It's actually a common industry tactic. When relationships break publicly, they're often repaired privately first. And only after everything is aligned behind the scenes does the public narrative change. Another detail that adds weight to this theory is how carefully both sides have been speaking. Or not speaking. Depp hasn't made any aggressive statements about Disney recently. And Disney hasn't made any definitive statements about excluding him either. That mutual silence isn't accidental. It creates space. And in negotiations, space is valuable. There's also the script situation. Multiple reports over the past 2 years have mentioned that Pirates 6 has gone through different versions. One reportedly focused on a new cast. Another explored a spin-off direction. And none of them moved forward into production. That kind of creative reset usually signals one thing. Uncertainty at the core concept level. And when a studio can't lock the concept, it often means they're missing a key piece. Something that makes the story feel complete. And for Pirates, that missing piece is obvious to the audience. Even if the studio hasn't officially said it. Then comes the fan factor again. But this time, it's more organized. Not just random posts or comments, but consistent engagement patterns. Every time Pirates trends online, it's tied to Depp. Every time rumors appear, they spread quickly. And studios monitor that. Not casually, but through data and analytics teams that track audience interest in real time. So when you combine audience demand, financial incentive, and creative uncertainty, you get a situation where reconsidering past decisions becomes not just possible, but logical. But logic doesn't guarantee action. Because there's still one major obstacle. Trust. And trust, once broken publicly, isn't easy to rebuild quietly. Both sides would need assurances. Disney would need reliability. Depp would need respect. And those aren't things you solve with a single meeting. This is where the timeline becomes important. If Pirates 6 were in active production right now, with a confirmed cast and release window, these rumors would likely be weaker. But the fact that the project is still in development gives room for change. And in Hollywood, development phases are where the biggest shifts happen. There's also a narrative advantage to waiting. If Disney were to reconnect with Depp immediately after the trial, it would have looked reactive, emotional, possibly even pressured. But by letting time pass, the context changes. It becomes a business decision instead of a response. And that distinction matters for public perception. And speaking of perception, the way media coverage has evolved is another clue. Earlier reports were definitive. Moving on, rebooting, new direction. But more recent coverage uses softer language. possibility, discussions, uncertain future. That shift in tone reflects a shift in information. Journalists don't change language randomly. They adjust based on what sources are indicating. One particularly interesting discussion highlighted by BBC News focused on how public opinion can influence long-term casting decisions. While they didn't mention pirates specifically in that segment, the principle applies directly. When audience attachment to a character is strong enough, replacing that character becomes a higher risk than keeping them. And Jack Sparrow is one of those rare characters where the actor and the role are almost inseparable. You can recast many roles, but some become too iconic to replicate without backlash. So now everything circles back to the same question. If Disney knows all of this, what's stopping them from making a move? The answer might be simpler than it looks. They're waiting for the right moment. Not just the right deal, but the right narrative. Because when this decision becomes public, it won't just be about a movie. It will be about what it represents. Redemption, reconciliation, or strategic alignment. Depending on how it's presented. And that presentation has to be controlled carefully. Too early, and it looks rushed. Too late, and the opportunity loses impact. So the timing has to feel natural. Even if it's planned. There's also the possibility that discussions are already further along than anyone realizes. In Hollywood, finalized deals can stay hidden until studios are ready to announce them. Contracts get signed, schedules get adjusted, and only then does the public find out. But even if that's not the case here, even if everything is still in early stages, the direction is clear. This isn't a closed door anymore. It's a door that's slightly open. Just enough for speculation to grow. And speculation, in this industry, often serves a purpose. It tests reactions. It builds anticipation. It creates a conversation before any official step is taken. So when people say these are just rumors, they're not wrong. But they're also not seeing the full picture. Because rumors, especially consistent ones, usually start from something real. Even if that something is still developing. And right now, all signs point to a situation that's evolving. Slowly, carefully, and very deliberately. Which brings us to the most important part of this entire